Sorry for starting a bit late. My name is Sina Luka from Togo. I'm the chair of the AFSA Climate Change Working Group. AFSA stands for Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I'm happy to have you here and have on the panel 4 colleagues of ours fighting for food sovereignty for small-scale farmers in Africa. And we call this press conference to draw the attention of the media and the global citizens around how things are going and how important it is for us to ensure that the climate negotiations really go in favor of those who are feeding the world. My colleague at my right is Mr. Nimo Bassey. He is ex-president of Friends of the Earth, and now he's director of HOMEF, an NGO based in Nigeria. Sorry. Mr. Faustin is board member of AFSA. He's Rwanda national, so he knows all about AFSA. And my colleague Teresa Anderson from ActionAid, who has been following the Koronivai joint work on agriculture from the very beginning. And then Sarah Likel from Secours Catholique in France. Secours Catholique just released a very interesting document on how agriculture can help a lot in achieving food sovereignty in the world. First, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Faustin on behalf of AFSA to place the context. Monsieur Faustin.
Thank you very much. In the first place, I wish to thank you for coming to attend this press conference. The Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa is an alliance, a Pan-African alliance that promotes agroecology and fights for food sovereignty. We normally look at food not only as what we eat, but what we desire to eat, and what our cultures look at it as it is. So we are here today to emphasize that we do not come to the COPs only as observers, but also to add to the voice of the negotiating tables. One thing that is very key is that in our countries in Africa, back in Africa, a bigger proportion of the population is the small-scale farmers, and they are the ones that feed our continent. And they are the ones who are most hit by climate change issues and effects. And therefore, whatever negotiations go around that do not address the issues, to us are null and void. And we are here to add our voice that the negotiations, the COP negotiations, should always be trying to address issues of the people that are badly hit by these climate change effects and the small-scale farmers. And we also want to echo that food sovereignty is an important issue to consider, that agroecology is an important issue to consider. There have been a lot of discussions, and agriculture has been taking shapes. We have been hearing about climate-smart agriculture, but wondering as how climate-smart it is from the way it is practiced. And therefore, we encourage agroecology, and we believe that that is the way to go. That is the way that can feed nations. Somebody will be adding much more on that. But what I want to put out here is that we are very disappointed, especially the fact that the IPCC report has not been welcomed by some of the countries is a joke to us. Because what we are here to discuss is about the effects of global warming, and that report is what it's talking about. If it is not welcomed, it means that we are here to do nothing. The negotiations are not bringing sense. And therefore, we request the nations to rethink about welcoming this IPCC report so that it becomes our basis of engagement. Otherwise, I thank you very much once again for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Faustin. Chair Nimo Bassey, please tell us what's the issue? Why you think small-scale farmers and African peasants have the key solution to the rising of the climate temperature?
Oh, well, thank you very much, Sena. And I think it's critical to emphasize the fact that we are in a situation where public spaces deny the reality. For example, right here in the COP, we're not placing emphasis on real solutions. And this is very saddening indeed. In 2008, there was a report called the ISTA report, International Assessment of Agricultural Science and Knowledge. And that report showed very clearly that the future of food production in the world would depend on small-scale farmers. And we do know that small-scale farmers have been carrying out agriculture in a way that maintains the quality of the soil, in a way that preserves water resources, in a way that works with the ecological systems. And this is the sense of where we're promoting agroecology, agriculture that works with Mother Earth, agriculture that works with local knowledge, agriculture that doesn't depend on artificial inputs, agriculture that is also a science. Science is not only when something that is done in the laboratory. Science can be done on the streets. Our people have over the years developed systems that are consistent with all the requirements of science. So our farmers are scientists who work according to the rhythms of nature. This is what we expect to see in the negotiations and also in the implementations. But what we see so far is that mostly agriculture is referred to as something that provides carbon sinks. So you look at a tree, you are seeing carbon. You look at food crops, you are seeing carbon. This is clearly a way that is very, very funny indeed, and we should call this out. So we are seeing clearly that small-scale farmers have helped the world. When agriculture is mentioned as one of the greatest emitters of greenhouse gases, it is not the agriculture practiced by small-scale farmers. It is industrial farming that is harming the planet. Industrial farming that is promoting waste, promoting all kinds of release of toxic chemicals and greenhouse gas to the atmosphere. So we just need to remind ourselves that we have the solution. Our farmers, small-scale farmers, have the solution. They are already cooling the planet. But these efforts will not hold if action is not taken to support the work of small-scale farmers. And the work must be taken. The support needs to come from all realms of endeavor: social, political, economical, and of course ecological. When Labour talks about just transition, I believe this just transition includes a transformation of the entire socio-ecological systems. So it includes how we grow crops, how we eat the food that we produce, and the balance, so that we don't just waste resources. So in sum, I believe that we already have people, our farmers, who are on the right track to keep the temperature down, and their efforts should not be subverted by politicians and negotiators who are listening only to agribusiness.
Thank you very much. I think the message is quite clear. Now it's important for us to understand where we are today after these 2 weeks of negotiations. What did we manage to achieve? Teresa Andersons has the detail.
Thank you, Senna, and thank you very much to AFSA. ActionAid is very happy to be working with AFSA on this platform. So, as many of you may know, last year COP23, which was held in Bonn but hosted by Fiji, and the Koronivai joint work on agriculture was agreed and announced. And it was named after an area of Fiji called Koronivai, where they have an agricultural research station. So that is why it's called Koronivai. And Fiji government were very pleased to have a legacy from COP23 that they could be proud of, that they could be remembered throughout in future negotiations. And what was agreed that there would be a series of workshops to go into the actual detail, the technical detail about various aspects of agriculture. You know, what does soil carbon need to look like? What does adaptation need to look like? What does soil nutrients and manure management need to look like? What does how does livestock need to be managed, and what are the socio-economic and food security dimensions of agriculture? So these were 5 technical topics that will be rolled out over the next 2 years in the Koronivai joint work on agriculture. So this session, they said, right, we'll discuss the modalities. How are we going to organize those workshops? Because we all know these things don't just happen. We actually have to decide how they happen for them to happen well. And that's the political challenge, right? That is why countries and where countries always end up disagreeing because you decide the modalities and that's what you always fight over. So that is what there was a big fight again and not much progress about these modalities because developing countries, particularly the Africa group, feel like they feel across the climate negotiations that they're getting very little support, very little means of implementation, especially for adaptation, and that this is a big gap in agriculture, and in all sectors really, and it's the same issue that is blocking negotiations even today, even here in the Paris rulebook. Finance seems to be the continuing issue that blocks progress. Nonetheless, it's really important that modalities are agreed and they will continue to discuss them at the next session. But we really need to see how these workshops roll out. Like, who decides who will present? Who decides what information will come through? Who decides how to pick? What are the good bits to recommend? And these are things that we need to watch really closely as civil society, as farmers' organizations, as people who really care about farmers and adaptation and the climate. We need to keep a close eye on how these workshops roll out to avoid any risk of co-opting by industrial agriculture, as Nimo talked about. Because we know what the real solutions are. We know that agroecology is the solution. We know that, like, small-scale pastoralist farmers are really, very much compatible with climate solutions and feeding people and local cultures and their local economies. And we don't want the wrong people penalized by false framing of industrial agriculture as the big solution for climate change, or climate-smart agriculture being the big solution for climate change. So we need this workshop to be really clear, and we need the outcomes from these workshops to be really clear and based on the right values. So as many groups are calling for the workshops to develop clear guidelines based on 5 key principles that we think should be all agriculture recommendations should be based on, which would be a really socio-economic basis for food security, which Sarah will unpack, adaptation, absolute emission reductions, not emission reductions intensity, but absolute total emission reductions, ecological integrity, and gender responsiveness. And we think these would be really good principles and guidelines to help ensure that agriculture actually serves African farmers, the farmers of the world, and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So now everybody can go home with the key message from the Katowice negotiations around agriculture. The work is yet to start, I think so. So I know Sarah has a few details about the key pillars for which we should be fighting for in the coming weeks, but also the key message that we can put forward as friends of farming, knowing that you can get rid of everybody, not of a farmer.
Yeah, thank you. So Secours Catholique Caritas France is very happy to collaborate with AFSA on this topic. And following up on what Teresa just said, we need in the Koronivai joint work and on every agricultural policy to have a focus on food security. Certain parties have a clear interest in focusing on food production. Food production is not equal to food security. Food production is focusing on the amounts, and clearly it doesn't answer poverty. It doesn't answer the fact that there's still 821,000 million people that are still suffering from hunger every day. So there's 4 pillars to food security that are internationally defined by the FAO. All parties agreed to this definition, and we are pushing for having this definition recognized in the Koronivai joint work, so that those 4 pillars can frame all of the discussions, and so that the focus can be put on people who suffer from hunger and can be put on small-scale farmers. Those 4 pillars are availability of the food, of course, but also access, and this is very linked to the issue of poverty. Quality, which means no chemicals, fertilizers that are toxic, which means good quality from a nutrition point of view, and culturally adapted food. And the fourth pillar is the regularity of all of the above, and this is key to ensure food security. So civil society, as Teresa just said, have pushed to have all those discussions in the Koronivai framed under this principle. Today we seem to have some resistance coming, and for us in Caritas France, framing climate action in the agricultural sector with a focus on food security can only lead to agroecology. That's why we have elaborated this report on public policies and how public policies should frame and should take the opportunity of climate action. We all need to rethink our food systems to lead and transform towards agroecology. So agroecology can answer several challenges. Adaptation in agriculture, which is very key to ensuring food security in Africa, because agroecology is more resilient. Also, in terms of mitigation issues in transforming food systems, because agroecology allows to have short circuits to avoid the use of pesticides. And so this allows to answer the four pillars of agroecology. But we need strong political will and strong political transformation to lead to this transition. We need to stop subsidies for chemicals and for chemical inputs. We need to protect domestic production and to ensure food sovereignty in face of international trade. And this is something that needs to be addressed, that has been silenced in this space, but this is key to food sovereignty, is key to ensure the transition to agroecology and to ensure food security. There's also the issue of securing peasants and smallholders' land rights, and the issue of governance, to rethink governance, to include smallholders' participation in the elaboration of public policies, so that they are focused on their needs and on the local production, and not focusing on some we've mentioned it several times, climate smart agriculture and some other false solutions that are just here to implement some technologies that are just here to serve some private interests, and not the fight against hunger, which should be the motive of this whole work.
Thank you very much, Saralika. If you just joining us, this is a press conference organized by the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, AFSA, for which I'm the president of the Climate Change Commission, Mr. Nimubase from HOMEF, Nigeria, Mr. Foster from Rwanda, Teresa from ActionAid, and then Saralika from Secours Catholique France. We have a few minutes, and your questions are most welcome, please. Questions from the floor. If ever there are some. Oh, yes. Muchas gracias, señorita.
Translate.
Thanks very much. This was a very enlightening press conference to us, because we couldn't really follow the work that has been done during these weeks regarding to the Koronivai work plan. And as we understood, there will be some activities next session and next year under the Koronivai work program. Is that and we were wondering how other organizations from all over the world, and for instance from Latin America, can engage in these activities next year and in the workshop that was mentioned. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Abdul Karim. I am from Bangladesh. In fact, I believe that there are a lot of opportunities from the South-South experience to be shared by countries of the South, instead of depending on the North all the time. For example, for Bangladesh, we have made real innovations at the grassroots level in agriculture to adapt to nature. For example, we have developed stress tolerance, salinity tolerant paddy and other vegetables, then flood tolerant rice varieties, etc. Then vermicompost, the best quality organic fertilizer. Then we are utilizing solar power for irrigation, low-lift pump with the help of solar energy, without electricity, etc. And even use of urea fertilizer in a planned way so that optimum utilization is ensured. So I think these sort of local technologies could be shared among the South-South countries instead of depending on the North all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that to be enough. Maybe we take advantage of the questions and then share with the audience our final words. Maybe we start from Sarah.
Yeah, on the question on how local organizations and maybe peasant organizations can involve, I think this is key to have a positive outcome of this Koronivai joint work. For now, we saw that there is a lot of interest from the private sector into this program, and we have a hook because in May decision last May in Bonn, when they agreed on a roadmap and how they will conduct those different workshops, there was a mention. We managed to have a mention in about participation, and we strongly encourage peasant organizations to come and to also offer their expertise to the Secretariat, because the Secretariat is actually the one putting in place the program of every workshop and
Yes, thank you. Maybe Teresa, 1 second. Can you wrap up, Teresa, on our behalf?
Thank you. Yes. Firstly, there are some key opportunities. As Sarah mentioned, you can watch the negotiations. We're allowed to watch. Secondly, you can write a submission to the Secretariat, which be read to all parties on the upcoming topics of adaptation and soils. If you have views on the best strategies for this, please do write a submission. Thirdly, if you have interesting stories that you think should be presented, please encourage the Secretariat to include you in the workshop. We have an opportunity to make the Secretariat make those workshops interesting and not super boring, okay, because the last one was pretty boring. So let's make it lively, colourful, share examples from countries that we know can work and really influence. And I see you have a pink badge, so you can engage both as a party and as civil society as you wish as well.
Thank you very much, Mr.